I never thought my life could twist into a nightmare so quickly. One evening, as I was going through some paperwork for my late father's estate, I noticed something odd. A bank transfer I hadn't authorized had gone through, and the amount was far too large to be a simple mistake. My heart sank. I stared at the screen, trying to convince myself I was imagining things, but the numbers didn't lie. It was then I remembered the hushed conversations I had overheard a few nights ago. Gideon had been talking to someone on the phone in the study. I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but curiosity got the better of me. The words I caught made my blood run cold. Gideon had always been careful about hiding his private affairs, but I thought we were solid, married for 7 years, building a life together, sharing everything. And yet, here was proof suggesting he might be planning something behind my back. I tried to rationalize it at first. Maybe it was a misunderstanding, maybe there was a logical explanation. But when I noticed his nervous glances during dinner and the way he avoided eye contact, a pit formed in my stomach. Something was very wrong. Then there was Ronnie, my own cousin. The one person I'd trusted as family, someone I grew up with, sharing childhood secrets and holiday dinners. Ronnie had always been a little competitive, a little envious of my father's success, and by extension me. But I never imagined she could cross that line. Yet now, piecing things together, it all made a sick sort of sense. The transfer, the secretive phone calls, the whispered tones. It wasn't just Gideon acting alone. I could feel the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. I went over every memory, every casual remark that had seemed harmless before. The gift she had given me for my birthday last year, the way she always managed to show up just when I was vulnerable. I felt foolish for not seeing it sooner. How could someone so close, someone I loved, work against me with such calculation? My chest tightened as I realized the truth. They were working together. My own husband, the man I had trusted with everything, was conspiring with my cousin to take what was rightfully mine. I sat down heavily on the edge of the sofa, trying to make sense of it. I felt anger bubbling beneath the surface, but there was also disbelief, hurt, and a deep, gnawing sadness. How do you process the idea that your life partner and your own blood could plan your downfall? The feeling of being erased, replaced by their greed, made me shiver. I knew I couldn't confront them just yet. Not without proof, not without a plan. But in that moment, staring at the documents and replaying the conversations in my head, I realized my world had changed forever. I wasn't just dealing with betrayal. I was facing an enemy disguised as the people I loved most. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a spark ignited. A stubborn refusal to let them succeed. I wasn't going to be erased. Not by Gideon. Not by Ronnie. The fear, the heartbreak, the sense of being betrayed, it all fueled a growing resolve. I would find out everything, uncover their plan, and make sure they could never take what was mine. That night, sitting alone in my father's study, I swore to myself that they would regret ever underestimating me. Gideon's behavior had become impossible to ignore. He started staying late at the office more often, claiming urgent meetings, but I knew his company had been stable for years. His phone seemed permanently glued to his hand, and every time it rang, he would step into another room or whisper in hushed tones. Even at home, he was distant. The warmth and laughter we once shared had been replaced by cold silences and sharp responses to the simplest questions. I tried to convince myself it was stress or overwork, but a sinking feeling told me otherwise. One evening, while sorting through some estate paperwork, I noticed subtle inconsistencies. A few documents didn't match my handwriting. Signatures looked slightly off. Some invoices had been altered, and amounts on paper didn't align with the statements I had seen earlier. My pulse quickened as the realization hit me. Gideon wasn't just hiding something emotionally. He was tampering with finances, manipulating numbers in ways that could seriously harm me. It was small at first, almost unnoticeable, but it was enough to make me question everything I had trusted him with. I felt trapped between disbelief and fear. How could the man I loved, the one I had shared my life with, plan against me? And the thought that Ronnie, my own cousin, might be involved made the betrayal unbearable. She had always been family, someone I thought I could trust completely. Yet, the evidence was piling up in a way that left no room for innocent explanations. I couldn't stop thinking about past interactions, trying to piece together whether certain remarks or behaviors had been subtle warnings I had ignored. Feeling overwhelmed and unsure of my next steps, I reached out to Jared Hollis, my oldest friend and the person I trusted most outside my immediate family. Jared had always been level-headed, someone who could see things clearly when emotions clouded judgment. I told him what I had noticed, sharing the forged documents and discrepancies in the accounts. He listened carefully, nodding, and his face reflected concern rather than shock. "Don't confront him yet," he advised firmly. "You need more evidence, and you need a plan. If he's as careful as he seems, confronting him now could make him cover his tracks." His words were a mix of comfort and warning. I wanted to act immediately, to demand answers, to accuse, but Jared's advice made sense. Patience had never been my strongest trait, but in this case, rushing could cost me everything. I found myself torn. Part of me wanted to believe there was some explanation, some misunderstanding I could fix with a calm conversation. The other part of me knew the truth was darker, that the people I loved most might be plotting against me. That night, lying awake in the quiet of our home, I felt the weight of isolation pressing down. Betrayal by a spouse is one thing, but betrayal by family adds another level of pain. Every memory of laughter with Ronnie, every moment of trust shared with Gideon, now felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Fear, sadness, and anger tangled together, leaving me restless and determined. I knew I had to tread carefully to gather proof, and to understand the full extent of what I was facing before making any moves. The house was a delicate balance, everyone between asleep, survival but and I couldn't wait another moment. And I had no choice but to navigate demanded answers. And I knew I had to see for myself what Gideon was hiding. Slowly, I crept to the study, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. The door was slightly ajar, and I pushed it open just enough to slip inside without making a sound. The room smelled faintly of cedar and paper, but there was something else, an underlying tension, like the air itself was holding its breath. On the desk, I saw stacks of papers I had never noticed before. My hands trembled as I sifted through them, and then I froze. There, in Gideon's careful handwriting, was a plan, step by step, methodical and cold. They intended to declare me legally incompetent, using forged medical assessments and manipulated documents to take control of my inheritance. Every detail had been accounted for: lawyers, timelines, and even ways to isolate me from friends who might intervene. My stomach churned. The man I loved, the person I trusted completely, was plotting my erasure. I kept searching, desperate for more, and that's when I found the letters. They were hidden in a drawer, folded neatly, addressed to Ronnie. The words were intimate, affectionate, and filled with a secrecy that left no room for doubt. Alongside them were small gifts, a watch, a bracelet, tokens of a closeness that had been hidden from me. My hands shook as I held them, unable to believe what I was seeing. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I had imagined. Not only had Gideon been plotting against me, but he had also been having an affair with my own cousin, the person I had trusted as family. Anger boiled up inside me, sharp and consuming. I wanted to scream, to confront them both, but there was a terrifying clarity in that moment. I felt heartbreak, disbelief, and a rage that made my vision blur. The quiet hum of the house around me contrasted sharply with the storm raging inside. I wanted to cry, to collapse, to feel the weight of this double betrayal, but I couldn't. Not yet. I needed to think. I needed to breathe. I sat down on the edge of the study chair, papers and letters spread before me, and for the first time, I allowed myself to imagine what could happen if I stayed passive. They would succeed. They would steal everything my father left me, erase me from the life I had worked so hard to build, and walk away as though I had never existed. The thought was unbearable. And then, amidst the fear and pain, a spark of determination lit inside me. I realized that I couldn't allow them to win. I couldn't let Gideon and Ronnie manipulate the system, manipulate me, and destroy my life. I needed a plan, a careful and precise strategy that would protect me and ensure they faced the consequences of their betrayal. That night, in the silence of the study, I made a vow to myself. I wouldn't be erased. I wouldn't be broken. And I would make sure they regretted ever thinking they could take what was mine. I knew I couldn't confront Gideon yet. I needed to understand just how far he would go and what he was willing to risk for my inheritance. One afternoon, while he was out, I carefully left some fake financial statements in my study, documents that suggested an extra account with a large sum, one that didn't exist. My hands shook as I placed them under a stack of papers, heart hammering with a mixture of fear and anticipation. I watched, waiting for any sign that he would take the bait. It didn't take long. By evening, I noticed his subtle change in demeanor. He lingered near the study, fidgeting, glancing at the documents I had left. Later, when I casually mentioned the account in conversation, he reacted almost too quickly, asking questions with a thinly veiled eagerness. It was a small, fleeting detail, but it confirmed everything I feared. His greed ran deep, and he wouldn't hesitate to exploit anything for his benefit. The betrayal felt heavier in that moment, knowing he fell for such a simple test without hesitation. Veronica, on the other hand, continued her act with unnerving skill. During a family dinner, she laughed and joked, pretending everything was normal, like the betrayal and her affair didn't exist. She leaned close to me at one point, her voice soft and playful, commenting on mundane things, testing my reaction. I could feel the subtle tension beneath her words, the way she tried to manipulate me without being obvious. She was skilled at hiding her intentions, but I could sense it, the undercurrent of deceit, the hidden agenda beneath the smiles and polite conversation. Sitting alone later that night, I felt the weight of isolation pressing down. Even surrounded by people, I was painfully aware that I couldn't trust my husband or my own cousin. Their ability to pretend, to mask their true intentions, left me feeling alone in a house that was supposed to be my sanctuary. The anger, the hurt, and the sense of betrayal mingled together, leaving me restless and sleepless. Every smile from Veronica felt like a reminder of the treachery I had uncovered, and every gesture from Gideon reminded me of his willingness to betray the one person he should have loved most. Yet amidst the pain, a small clarity began to emerge. I realized that being hurt and angry alone would not help me. I needed to think strategically, to watch, to gather proof, and to understand exactly how deep their conspiracy ran. I had to be careful, to appear oblivious while observing every detail, every interaction, every opportunity they took to expose themselves. The night ended with a quiet determination. I could feel the anger simmering beneath the surface, but now it was sharpened with focus. They thought they could manipulate me, trick me, and take what was mine. But I was learning their patterns, their weaknesses, and the lengths they were willing to go. I knew the next steps had to be precise. I wouldn't act recklessly, but when the time came, I would strike with clarity and purpose. The betrayal had left me isolated, yes, but it had also awakened a resolve I didn't know I had. I knew I couldn't fight Gideon and Ronnie alone. The betrayal had left me wary and cautious, but it had also sparked a determination to protect what was rightfully mine. After some research, I reached out to Harper Lane, a private investigator known for uncovering family secrets and exposing hidden schemes. I explained the situation carefully, leaving out only what was necessary to protect my strategy, and Harper agreed to help. We started digging immediately. Harper was meticulous, going through bank statements, property records, and legal documents. Within days, we uncovered hidden bank accounts that Gideon had opened without my knowledge. These accounts held significant sums, clearly meant to divert money from my inheritance. We also found deeds to properties that had been transferred secretly, likely in preparation for a wider scheme. And the most shocking discovery came in the form of a forged will, an earlier version of my father's estate plan that had been altered to favor Gideon and, indirectly, Ronnie. Every piece of evidence confirmed what I had feared. The betrayal was thorough, premeditated, and ruthless. Even with this proof, I knew I needed more than just a professional ally. I needed someone from within the family who could understand the dynamics, who could see the deceit clearly. That's when I thought of Aunt Evelyn, Ronnie's mother. We had been estranged for years after a family dispute, but I remembered that she had never approved of Ronnie's manipulative ways. Reaching out to her was nerve-wracking, but I carefully explained the situation, presenting the evidence we had gathered so far. Evelyn's reaction was immediate. Her eyes filled with anger and disbelief as I recounted the details. She couldn't believe her own daughter was capable of such a betrayal, and the thought of her son-in-law plotting against me enraged her. Within hours, she had agreed to help, offering access to family records and her own insights into Ronnie's behavior. Having her on my side was more than just useful. It was a relief. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of hope rekindling inside me. With Harper's investigative skills and Evelyn's insider knowledge, I started to see a clearer path forward. I wasn't alone anymore. I had allies who understood the danger I faced, who could help me navigate the deceit and plan my next steps carefully. The isolation that had weighed so heavily on me was starting to lift. That night, sitting with Harper and talking quietly on the phone with Evelyn, I allowed myself a small, cautious optimism. The betrayal had been crushing, but it had also forced me to act, to think strategically, and to gather the right people around me. I realized that with careful planning, With allies I could trust, I could protect my inheritance and ensure that Gideon and Ronnie would face the consequences of their actions. For the first time since discovering their betrayal, I felt like I might actually be able to win. By now, I had all the proof I needed, but rushing in without a plan could ruin everything. I knew I had to be smart, careful, and strategic. My goal was to expose Gideon and Ronnie for what they were, but I also had to protect myself legally. One wrong move, and they could twist the story against me. I spent hours thinking, writing notes, and mapping out each step. Every move had to be calculated, every reaction anticipated. I started with subtle psychological tactics. I made small comments about honesty, trust, and loyalty in casual conversations, careful not to mention specifics. I watched Gideon closely, noticing how he reacted to certain words, how his posture stiffened when I mentioned responsibility or fairness. I even left hints that I knew more than I appeared to, small, quiet cues that made him second-guess what I actually knew. The change was gradual but noticeable. He began questioning his own actions, checking documents twice, and becoming twitchy over trivial matters. I could see paranoia creeping in, the same paranoia I had felt when I first discovered his betrayal. Manipulating him like this wasn't easy. A part of me hated myself for it. The man I once loved, the person I had trusted completely, was now a target in my plan for justice. Every time I saw him smile or heard his voice, I felt a pang of guilt. But that guilt was tempered by the knowledge that without this careful strategy, he and Ronnie could take everything from me. I reminded myself that this wasn't personal revenge, it was protection. I had to separate my emotions from my actions, even when it felt impossible. Meanwhile, Ronnie continued her act, pretending nothing had changed, laughing at family gatherings, and speaking to me in a way that was meant to unsettle me. But she was underestimating me. I had her mother, Evelyn, watching closely, and I had Harper tracking every move they made. I wasn't blind to their schemes anymore. The power had subtly shifted, and I could feel it. One evening, I noticed something that made my heart race. Gideon's eyes lingered on me longer than usual, his questions sharper, his tone more guarded. He was beginning to suspect that I knew more than I was letting on. The tension between us thickened, silent and electric, like a storm about to break. I realized then that the next steps had to be perfect. One misstep could alert him fully, and he could take desperate measures that would complicate everything. I felt the weight of the coming confrontation pressing down, but I also felt a strange thrill. This wasn't just about protecting my inheritance anymore. It was about reclaiming control of my life, proving that betrayal wouldn't break me. Gideon might be suspicious now, but I had the advantage. I had allies, evidence, and a plan. And when the time came, they wouldn't see what hit them. I decided it was time to draw them in, to get Gideon and Ronnie to reveal themselves fully. I planned a small family gathering, something that seemed innocent, a celebration under the guise of mending relationships and spending time together. I sent out invitations with care, making sure everything looked warm, casual, and welcoming. To the outside world, it was just a harmless event. To me, it was a carefully laid trap. On the day of the gathering, I made sure everything was perfect. The house was warm and inviting, soft music played in the background, and the table was set beautifully. I greeted Gideon and Ronnie with smiles that hid the storm of anger inside me. Every gesture, every word was measured. I had Harper set up hidden recordings, cameras disguised as decorations, and copies of critical documents placed where I could subtly reference them if needed. It was a delicate balance, enough pressure to make them slip, but nothing that would expose my hand too soon. As the evening went on, I noticed the subtle changes in them. Gideon fidgeted more than usual, stealing glances around the room, as if he sensed something wasn't right. Ronnie laughed too loudly, her movements sharp and rehearsed, trying to keep up the facade. Every word they said, every glance they exchanged, added to the growing pile of evidence. I kept my exterior calm, smiling and talking lightly, but inside, my rage burned hotter than I could contain. I remembered the letters, the gifts, the plans. They had betrayed me in the most intimate way possible, and now it was time they could not hide it. I guided conversations carefully, dropping subtle hints about honesty and trust, carefully watching how Gideon and Ronnie reacted. They began to stumble over their words, contradicting themselves, their nervous laughter betraying their inner panic. Every small slip was a piece of the puzzle I needed. I could feel the tension in the room, thick and electric, and I knew they were starting to realize something was off. But despite the unease creeping into their expressions, they were too deep into their own schemes to back out. Gideon had already committed to his lies, and Ronnie's manipulations had gone too far to retreat without losing everything. Their overconfidence became their weakness, a flaw I was ready to exploit fully. Each passing moment gave me more clarity, more proof, and more leverage. I kept my calm exterior, letting them think they still had control, while I silently catalogued every misstep, every look of guilt, and every word of confession they unwittingly offered. The trap was working perfectly. They were exposing themselves in ways they couldn't take back, and I had front-row access to all of it. My heart pounded with a mix of satisfaction and anger, knowing that the betrayal that had once left me shattered would now be the very thing that exposed them completely. By the end of the evening, I had everything I needed. Gideon and Ronnie were entangled in their own deceit, unaware that every move they had made was being recorded and documented. The trap had worked. The pieces were falling into place, and soon the reckoning would come. The day of the confrontation, I felt a strange mix of nerves and determination. I invited Gideon and Ronnie to my home under the pretense of discussing family matters. My lawyer was present, along with a few close friends and relatives who could witness the truth firsthand. I wanted this exposure to be undeniable, so there would be no room for their lies or manipulation. Every detail had been carefully prepared, every document and recording in place. As soon as they arrived, I calmly asked them to sit. My voice was steady, controlled, but inside I was a storm of anger and hurt. I began presenting the evidence one by one. The hidden bank accounts, the transferred properties, the forged will, and the letters from Gideon to Ronnie. All of it laid bare. I watched their reactions carefully. Gideon's face went pale, his hands trembling slightly as he tried to maintain composure. Ronnie's eyes widened, and she fidgeted nervously, her usual confident demeanor cracking. Gideon immediately tried to deflect, claiming misunderstandings and mistakes, but his words sounded hollow even to him. Every denial contradicted the evidence in front of him. I remained calm, letting the proof speak louder than my words. Each document, each recording, left him with less room to maneuver. I could see the panic building in Ronnie. Her usual smugness evaporated, replaced with a mix of fear and desperation. She began shouting, blaming Gideon, and exposing the depth of their greed and betrayal even further. My lawyer carefully documented everything, ensuring that every piece of evidence would hold up legally. I felt a strange sense of relief as the truth unfolded. The people I had trusted and loved were now revealed in their true colors, and the betrayal that had haunted me was being addressed openly. Friends and family watched in shock, some expressing disbelief, others shaking their heads in sympathy. It was a painful moment, but necessary. The truth could no longer be hidden. When the confrontation ended, I realized that my inheritance and reputation were fully protected. Gideon and Ronnie would face legal consequences for their actions, and the manipulations that had once threatened to destroy my life were now completely exposed. Yet, even with justice on my side, I felt a deep sadness. Family had been fractured, trust had been broken, and a bond one had once held dear was forever changed. As I stood there, watching them leave in defeat, I allowed myself to feel both vindicated and heartbroken. I had taken control of my life, defended what was mine, and ensured that betrayal would not go unpunished. But the emotional toll lingered. Betrayal cuts deeper when it comes from those closest to you, and even with justice served, the wound left by their deceit would take time to heal. For the first time in months, I felt a quiet strength rising within me. The storm had passed, and I had emerged stronger, aware of my resilience and ability to protect myself. Though the pain remained, the clarity and empowerment I now felt were worth every difficult step I had taken. After the confrontation, I knew life wouldn't just snap back to normal. There was a long road ahead to rebuild, both emotionally and practically. The betrayal I had experienced left deep scars, but I refused to let it define me. Slowly, I began reclaiming my life, focusing on the things that gave me strength, my work, my home, and the people who had truly stood by me. Every small step forward felt like a victory, a quiet reminder that I could survive and even thrive after such a painful experience. I became more careful about who I trusted. The events with Gideon and Ronnie had taught me that betrayal could come from the closest people, even family. I started observing relationships more closely, listening to intuition, and paying attention to small signs. But this caution didn't make me closed off, it made me wiser. I leaned on friends like Jared, who had supported me without judgment from the very start. His loyalty was a balm, and spending time with him reminded me that some people could be trusted completely. My bond with family members who had been supportive, like Aunt Evelyn, also grew stronger. Together, we shared stories, laughter, and even quiet moments of reflection, reinforcing that love and loyalty still existed around me. I also allowed myself moments of reflection on everything that had happened. The anger and hurt were still there, but they had begun to change into something else, a sense of clarity and resilience. I realized that intelligence and careful planning had been my tools, and those same tools could continue to guide me through life. The betrayal had been a painful lesson, but it was also an education. I had learned to anticipate deceit, to act with strategy, and to value honesty above all else. Every challenge I faced afterward felt a little easier, every decision a little more confident, because I knew I could survive even the most calculated betrayal. There was also a quiet, private satisfaction in knowing that Gideon and Ronnie could never harm me financially again. Legal measures were in place, the evidence secured, and my inheritance safe. I didn't need to flaunt it or boast. The knowledge itself was a comfort. Their schemes had failed completely, and that was enough. I felt a sense of justice and closure, a recognition that while the emotional wounds would take time to heal, the practical consequences of their greed had been fully addressed. As months passed, I began to feel lighter. My home, my work, and my friendships became anchors of stability and joy. I embraced independence, knowing that I no longer had to rely on anyone who might betray me. The strength I had built was real, earned through pain but solidified through careful action. I understood now that resilience wasn't about avoiding betrayal. It was about surviving it and emerging stronger, wiser, and more self-assured. Moving into my new home felt like stepping into a life I had fought to claim. Every corner reflected my choices, my independence, and my determination to leave the past behind. The walls were filled with light, the rooms spacious and warm, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. This home wasn't just a place to live. It was a symbol of freedom, a marker of how far I had come after the betrayal that had once threatened to destroy me. With the weight of the past behind me, I began dedicating more time to my personal passions. I immersed myself in the things that brought me joy, whether it was painting, writing, or simply spending quiet moments in the garden I had created. Every activity reminded me that life could be beautiful even after pain, and that focusing on growth was far more rewarding than dwelling on anger. These moments of self-discovery strengthened me, helped me trust my instincts, and reinforced the knowledge that I was capable of creating happiness for myself. I also found purpose in helping others who had suffered betrayal. Friends confided in me about their struggles, and I offered support, guidance, and understanding that came from experience. I realized that turning my pain into something constructive not only helped others, but also healed parts of myself. I shared strategies to protect themselves, to recognize warning signs, and to regain confidence after being hurt. Each small success, each smile or sigh of relief from someone I helped, reminded me that my journey had meaning beyond my personal story. Though my heart still carried scars, I no longer allowed the betrayal to dictate my life. I had learned to be cautious, yes, but also to embrace life with courage and curiosity. I formed deeper, more authentic connections with people who valued honesty and loyalty. Every friendship, every meaningful conversation, and every shared moment of laughter reinforced the fact that trust could be rebuilt carefully, and that resilience could transform pain into strength. Most importantly, I felt a quiet, enduring satisfaction in knowing I had reclaimed my power. Gideon and Ronnie were gone from my life, unable to touch my inheritance or manipulate me again. That knowledge was liberating. I had turned heartbreak into empowerment, and I carried that strength with me into every new decision, every new opportunity. My life was no longer dictated by fear or betrayal. It was guided by confidence, intelligence, and clarity. Standing in my new home, I finally understood the full weight of what I had accomplished. I had lost trust, but I had found my power. And that power, cultivated through resilience, cunning, and careful action, was an inheritance no one could ever steal from me. For the first time in years, I felt fully in control of my life, ready to embrace the future on my own terms, stronger, wiser, and truly free.